After a heavy night, the modern-day Vikings arrive at the ship late.
Been waiting for an hour. Boys were late this morning getting down. We get away on time, all right, but it's a little bit chaotic at the moment. I'd like it to be cleared up about an hour before we leave. See the weather? I guess we're going to get wet before we go.
Skipper Eddie Kagan is upset at the start of the voyage. A voyage that will take them from Norway to the Isle of Man for the island's millennium celebrations. Their ship, Odin's Raven, is a replica of the boats Vikings sailed in hundreds of years ago, with a few additions like a diesel engine, which the insurance company insisted on. The crew, 5 Norwegians and 11 from the Isle of Man, are led by Chieftain Robin Bigland.
Each man, before he went on a summer lead, which is a summer journey, a summer voyage of discovery, would bang a nail into the scarf at the top of the figurehead there. And that's exactly what we're doing. It's a good luck symbol. It's a gesture towards the god Odin. And you can see that everyone is putting one nail in for each individual. So there'll be 16 nails there.
The Vikings were quite superstitious in a way, weren't they?
They were extremely superstitious.
On a wet Sunday last summer, hundreds of people watched from the quayside at Trondheim as the men's lockers were carried aboard. And on a journey like this, you don't choose your cook lightly.
Here you can see I'm the most well-protected man on board. Quite useful set to have when you are at sea. And here we get a piece of reindeer tongue, dried reindeer tongue.
Reindeer tongue?
Yeah. It's wind-dried.
Yeah.
And it's full of protein.
Full of protein?
Yeah. So it makes quite good when you have been out at sea for a while and come ashore. May I give you a taste of it?
Well, I'm not going to see, but I'll certainly taste of it.
Yeah. It doesn't taste bad at all.
It has just been dried?
Yeah.
Through Jesus Christ our Lord, Amen. And the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with you. Amen. Amen.
1,000 years after the Vikings formed the first government on the Isle of Man, there are still strong links between the two peoples. After a brief service, the Bishop of Trondheim presented the longship's chieftain with a stone to be included in the structure of a new Manx cathedral.
Delighting. Absolutely delighting. I'll tell you a lot more when I see you in Shetland.
From Trondheim, the Odin's Raven had to sail down the huge Trondheim Fjord before she reached the Atlantic. It was the start of an exciting, ambitious adventure that began, like so many other things, over a lengthy lunch.
Over lunch. Back, I think, last June, a friend of mine and I were having lunch and we were discussing the concept of the millennium, what it meant. And I think at the same time I mentioned that it might be a very good idea to build a longship, because after all, that's what the concept was all about. The sum involved was £50,000 for the hull of the vessel. then it became an act of faith, undoubtedly. And the point at that time is whether or not one can be prepared to go ahead and do it. It's a little difficult going back to your wife and saying, darling, you know, I just bought a Viking longship for the weekend or something. Perhaps we'll take the children down to the Mediterranean.
How did you then go about choosing the crew?
Well, it was made very easy for us because the reception to the idea, I mean, I think on an island, an idea once spawned gets around very rapidly. And I put an advertisement in the paper, and I got about 75 or 80 replies straight away. And the caliber of the replies was such that it became quite obvious we could pick a crew without any difficulty at all. But we narrowed it down to 25 possibilities, and we trained throughout the winter with those people to find out a great deal more about them, and we all wanted to know a lot more about each other and how we would interact, because if you're going to spend a lot of time with a bunch of people on a boat, you've got to know a good deal about them.
How do members of the crew feel about the trip?
Scared, inevitably. It's an unknown experience. It's an open boat. Anything can happen.
Reaching 11 knots, Odin's Raven raced down the fjord, escorted by 2 Norwegian femberings, old-fashioned square-rigged boats sailed by enthusiasts. Odin's Raven is 50 feet long, a 2/3 scale replica of a longship dug out of mud almost 100 years ago. Now, after exhaustive trials, the crew must face the open Atlantic. It was the start of a 1,500-mile journey from Trondheim across waters in which perhaps a third of Viking longships foundered, onto Shetland, Orkney, round the north of Scotland, and then island hopping south to the Isle of Man.
The first trip we had was about 5 days odd, from Norway to Lerwick in the Shetlands. It was wet, cold, you know, everybody got sort of a bit fed up down in the dumps. But the worst thing is, I think, when you're trying to sleep at night and there's people on watch sort of stumbling around the deck, you tend to get stood on. People stand on your arms and on your head, and you get kicked in the ribs, and you tend to get a bit fed up with that, but yeah, it's not too bad. Good life.
I think the highlight was simply being able to cross the North Sea successfully. And probably the most exhilarating part was after we'd sailed out on the Norwegian coast and I'd been asleep under a sail. And previous to that, we'd had a very short chop in the fjord. And I woke up and the whole boat had a lovely, big, leisurely movement. Came out from under the sail when I'd been sleeping. And there's this lovely big roll, an ocean roll. And the whole boat was just going up and down. It was really beautiful, lovely sunlit night. It was absolutely exhilarating. It was fantastic. And the sheer disappointment which then occurred when the Norwegian fishing boats came over to us out of curiosity in exchange for fish and told us there was a southwesterly foresight gale imminent. That was quite something.
In the storm that followed, contact with the longship was lost. Planes, ships and even oil rigs were asked by Shetland Coast Guard to keep a lookout for Odin's Raven. In bad weather, even with radar, she was difficult to find at sea.
Ninian Central, this is Shetland Coast Guard. Have you any word for us on this Odin's Raven? Over.
Shetland Coast Guard, Ninian Central. Yeah, roger, sir. He was reported at 0900 local this morning as being 1.5 miles south of the Brent Alpha platform. 1.5 miles south.
I think when we'd been at sea for 2 days, we came across the oil rigs, and this was our first sort of navigation point on an oil field called the Ninian Field and the Brent Field. And at about 7 a.m, suddenly the fog just lifted, and there, right in front of us, were the oil rigs, and it was the most fantastic sight I've ever seen.
Good evening, Shetland. The latest news on the Viking longship Odin's Raven. She's now well on her way to Shetland. When last seen, she was doing more than 8 knots, but there's a southwesterly gale warning out for the Viking Sea area, and she may have to heave to off Ninian to ride it out.
The longship managed to ride out the storm, and the weather improved. It had been a worrying time for relatives and rescue services, and it wasn't until the next day that Odin's Raven was finally spotted. But the crew of the modern longship had one big advantage over their forebears. The oil production platforms were navigation aids and mid-ocean supermarkets.
We sailed through the first field and onto the next oil field, and there are about 7 rigs in this field, and we got to the second one about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And we had been in radio contact with them on the VHF, and as we were leaving the field they said, "Is there anything we can do for you? Is there anything at all we can do for you?" And we said, "Well, no, not at all. We wouldn't like anything to drink. We're completely self-sufficient." They said, "Well, we've got a little box of goodies for you." And no sooner had they said that than they sent a Z-boat out to meet us with massive great outboards on the back. And they brought us fresh fruit, a crate of Coke, massive great big chunks of roast beef, fresh bread, and a tub of ice cream and Sunday papers, British Sunday papers that we hadn't seen for about 6 weeks. And it was a marvellous time. We had a real old picnic in the middle of the North Sea, and the sun was blazing down, and it was quite fantastic.
In days past, a Viking sail on the horizon must have chilled many a heart. But the crew know they'll be given a warm welcome in Shetland, which keeps up its historic links with Norway. Robin and his merry men have a drink to celebrate their safe passage. It's taken 4 days with generous winds, a bit longer than some of the original Vikings took. Shetland was the longship's first landfall, as it was for the Norsemen whether they were going south to Britain or northwest to Iceland. The islands have their own Vikings, who each winter parade through the capital Lerwick in elaborate regalia. And as she sailed into harbour, hundreds of locals, many of Norwegian descent, turned out to welcome the longship. Making an unusual summer appearance, the Shetland Vikings were waiting to entertain the crew. The time for their annual festival is late January, when they march through the streets at night with flaming torches and burn the longship. Their way of burning the old year out. The old Viking year, that is.
Is that a good... It's been worthwhile.
Oh, yes, indeed, yeah, certainly has.
I wish we could just come with you to carry on the rest of the voyage.
There's not enough room on that. It's full enough anyway. I would sleep on that at night.
I would believe that, yeah.
You perhaps know my nephew, Walter Hollister from Castletown. Holly. Hollister, that's right. Oh, well, I'm his aunt. Oh, well. As I say from...
Ah, that's nice. You've been sailing through choppy waters. You know what Millennium Committee has to do every day. Hope it all come into the journeys in smoother waters. You get that? Yeah, regards, Quail, on behalf of the Millennium Committee.
The welcome was friendly and liquid. Whisky was the ubiquitous refreshment, and much more was to be consumed before the 3-day visit was over.
All right, have a nice one. Cheers.
got a few cars here.
The Shetlanders had heard all about the crew's training schedules, how they swam in the sea in winter and were kept fit by a former army PT instructor. These stories made the islanders wonder if the crew were health fanatics who would need special diets and go to bed early every night. However un-Viking such behaviour would have been, their doubts were soon dispelled as the celebrations got underway, and it was a time for recalling stories.
The Norwegians felt a bit peeved, in fact, because their flag was only a small one, the courtesy flag, so on their national day in Oslo, passing the town hall, there was this beauty. Yeah, it was 9 feet by 5, and it was up a 40-foot pole, and they looked at it longingly, and they'd fixed it up there with a crane so nobody could pinch it. Said, not possible. I said, Sid's not, we'll have it. So up I went. I got my teeth, clenching my knife there. 40 foot up, middle of Oslo, the crowd gathered round and started to applaud, and I got right up, got it down. And do you know there wasn't a policeman in sight? That was the only saving grace. Shinned down that pole and we legged it so fast through Oslo. You've never seen us travel so fast all trip.
The first official welcome was in Lerwick's Viking Hall, a hall that's seen many a party.
He's on the bilge. Rat number 3. Bilge rat number 3. You're on.
Kindly stay sober long enough to go through from 7 o'clock until 10 o'clock. After that, the Upheljar committee are looking after us, and you can do what the hell you like.
Right. You have to be able to stand up.
You have to be able to stand up. If not, you've got to be able to be propped quietly in a corner and keep quiet, all right?
You can speak for us, can you? Because if we just lie down, you can stand up and speak for us.
You son of a...
Can you tell us where it is, Robin?
I don't know. Can anyone tell us where it is tonight?
Left hand down a bit and 10 degrees to pull.
First class. I'll tell you what I don't enjoy.
On the way back. He's having a problem, Robin. He's having a problem remembering who he is.
He's on his knees already.
There's a lot of ferries that cross Oslo Fjord, one coming up from Sweden, great big, P&O ferries. And it had been arranged that we would go out at 6 o'clock one morning, dressed in Viking gear, and capture the captain and ransom him for a case of whiskey, because drink is very scarce in Norway. Not that we drink a lot, of course. And so at 6 o'clock in the morning, we were rowing towards this ship, and the port by the waterline was opened. They had a vague idea that something was happening. And one of our number, Knut, was on the ship as a kind of fifth columnist. And as we came near, a little customs launch came burbling out from Horten or Sandefjord and got between us and the ferry, so we had to moor to this customs boat. Well, notwithstanding, we jumped on to this customs boat to get across, and this little man came rushing around, screaming and shouting, saying, back, 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 and in doing so, Robin, our chieftain, his helmet fell over his eyes, and he fell backwards. He couldn't really see what was happening. It was all twisted round, so he was screaming at one of the Norwegians, Arnie, to sort the fellow out, deal with him, Arnie, and next time he hits me, I'll hit him, And in the end, we did manage to calm him down and get onto the ferry, and we took this rather bewildered captain back to the longship, and he, watched his ferry disappearing off into the distance. But the whole thing fell rather flat because we only managed to get a case of lager instead of whiskey, which I think was consumed in about 5 minutes by the whole crew. But there were some journalists on board who brought some Norwegian moonshine, which made the morning a little brighter.
The 3-day stop in Shetland was over all too quickly, and as in other ports of call, many friendships were made. They now sailed south for the islands of Orkney, another Viking stronghold in days gone past. Even today, people and places still have Norwegian names. On the way, as he'd done coming across the North Sea, marine biologist Mike Ingram trawled for lobster larvae for research purposes. It was a day-and-a-half sail from Shetland to Orkney, but a journey made memorable by a magnificent sunset. The next day, the weather changed again. The grey sky made for a subdued welcome to Orkney's main town, Kirkwall. However, once ashore, the welcome was to be as riotous and as liquid as the one before.
Yeah, the captain was thirsty, and he says to his boatswain's mate, Sid Snut, your captain's thirsty, and I take that as a direct order. So we got a spare yard on board the ship, and it had been surplus, really. It was in the way. The stowage was difficult. So in Arlesund, just went ashore with a couple of bilge rats, and we carted this spar right through town to found this huge building site. I saw the civil engineer in charge. Said, are you building a boat? He says, yes, I am. I said, right, it's going to cost you 3 crates of beer. And he looked at it and said, you've got a deal. So we carried 1 crate back each. Job done, simple as that. Robin's still looking for that spar, do you know that? I wouldn't mind, but he can't say anything because he helped drink the beer.
Leaving Kirkwall at the same time as Odin's Raven was a majestic-looking Faroese fishing boat in full sail. As with the longship, it was almost like flicking through the pages of a book on maritime history. The Faroese boat sailed slowly north, and the Vikings sailed west. She had to round Cape Wrath, then head south for Stornoway and the Hebrides.
This was when we came into Stornoway. It was about, I think, altogether 40, 50 dolphins coming. And they really acted for us, you know. It was a very good welcome for us to the island. So it seems to me that the people have done everything to show us that we are welcome. Even they sent out all the dolphins to meet us.
Because official receptions had been organised and they had to arrive at a precise time, if they were ahead of schedule, they anchored in an island bay. She lay up for a few hours on the coast of Skye, giving the crew a chance to rest or go ashore before sailing into the town of Portree.
Keep it on, boys. All the way up. Come around now, slack the canoe. Come on, BC. Slack the starboard sheet, canoe.
Once the boat's sailing, there isn't much for the crew to do. Often, the only man working is the helmsman. Men take turn on watch, sleep is snatched, books are read, and the world's problems are solved in conversation. When they're going into harbour, they get busy again. Then everyone's on duty. The misty Isle of Skye was living up to its name, but hundreds of people ignored the weather and turned out to welcome the crew to Portree. It's an island that thrives on tourism, and the Vikings were to be a major attraction.
I welcome you to the island of Skye. And in the language of the island, I'm prepared to read for Niren Skia. I am an officer all the tourist reef the Rover at Skishvishaw.
There's a lot of work to be done after the longship docks. The massive sail has to be furled and stored, and the crew's personal belongings locked in their lockers. Apart from an overnight watch, all of the men sleep ashore. At Portree, like other ports of call, the boat has to be ready to receive next day's stream of visitors, all anxious to get on board and view the longship at close quarters.
That's a throwing axe, yeah. You throw it, it goes straight.
Do you think I should have one of those in the classroom?
I reckon so, yeah.
Get something not quite so lethal.
As long as all your pupils have a helmet, they'll be okay. We'll try it on. There we are. Try the axe.
After the flow of visitors, 6 of the crew took Odin's Raven out into the Sound of Rassi, the stretch of water between Skye and the smaller island of Rassi. They put the longship through her paces, and gusting wind filled the sail, pushing her through the water at up to 9 knots, almost 12 land miles an hour. What started off as an afternoon sail was about to turn into a disaster that could have ended the epic journey.
Tie a piece onto it. Tie another one onto it, will you?
Yeah, give him that long one.
Come on, Eddie! Tie a piece onto that bed, you stupid one. Just tie that onto this one, will you? All line? Yeah, can't hold on. Okay. Let that go, quick.
Let that line go, boys. Let the line go, otherwise we...
Tie it on the end. Tie it on
the end. Let that go.
Try to take up tight, you're not talking about Mike. Like that.
Okay, lad, that's fine.
Back away.
Back away.
Back up.
Come forward then, get the line, it wasn't long enough. Let's go.
Eddie! Eddie! Can you take the sail down? The sail's all cut free. She'll drop as soon as she starts coming up. She's all free.
That's it.
She'll drop as soon as she starts lifting, she'll drop.
Don't get back.
All right, very
Eddie, at this time...
Sorry about that.
Eddie, at this time, are you sure the yoke is the best answer? Put it around the mark. The yoke is the best answer.
Go ahead.
On the chieftain's instruction, the rope was tied to a yoke, a strut of wood that supports the sail when it's not being used. But the strain was to prove too much.
She's up! 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 Ease up! Stop!
A wee bit.
Stop! Ease up your... Ease up your rope. Keep going! Keep away! Keep going! Keep going, Mark! Keep going! Keep going! Keep it going! Keep going! Keep! Go on! Keep it going! Go on! What's the course then, boys? Keep it going! Go! Go! Heave away! Keep it going till he's upright!
Hand it up, try it.
Heave away until she goes upright and then stop!
Take it a bit, snap.
It's wasting time.
Right, heave away now! She's almost up. Just heave away till she comes up.
She's full of water. For God's sake, Gareth, very fast on the bow, otherwise I'm quitting.
I'll make it faster. I'll make it fast better than a tower, okay?
Make her fast by the bow or the stern, and we'll get her into the beat, and we'll get her up.
Basically, we got caught out with the winds. As you saw when we came out of Portree earlier on, we were doing 8 or 9 knots, no problem, with the wind behind us. And when we got down on the corner here, we had a 180-degree change of wind, literally like that. It's just one of the things you get round here and in the fjords. Actually, when the boat capsized, we had no wind at all. A few, well, literally seconds before, the gust of wind came. We got shut the sheets. Unfortunately, the prieras, which are 2 devices for holding the sail down when we're sailing close haul.
2 ropes, sir?
Yeah, well, it's a sort of device made up of ropes. They were made fast and we just weren't able to free them quick enough. The other thing is, once the gunwale went under, there was no way she was going to come up anyway. When the sheets of the prieras were let go, that was it. She was over. I think it's just bad luck. Just as easy as that.
Was there any panic or fear?
No, because I think the people who were on that boat are used to being in boats and in the water as well. And the fact there was only 6 of us aboard at the time. And everybody just did whatever they were supposed to do without any problems at all. There was no panic at all.
In Norway, you were talking about how easy she was to handle, but basically, is she a stable boat in view of what's happened?
Yes, she's very stable. Yes.
Those that were on board were obviously very emotively involved. Those of us ashore, shall we say, a little bit more detached. As soon as I could see it being brought alongside, there was an immediate job to get sorted out. Every ability that we've got in the crew with regard to organisation had to come into full swing there and then. Some of the younger lads were really quite moved by it all. It was a big upset to them. They possibly looked at it, say, with an inward view. The most humorous thing that came out of it was young Rick, we call him our baby of the ship, you know, comes up, and it looked pretty bad. It looked quite disastrous. I said, we're not looking so good, but we can get the job done. He said, it's just so bad, I'm really in trouble. I said, well, what's your problem, Rick? Tell me. He said, I can't remember what time the dance starts tonight.
I took to Norway. And the second place, number 15. Where's number 15? You've won a box of chocolates here. Very well done indeed. Congratulations. And the first prize, would you believe it? The first prize tonight goes to the number 1 girl. There we are. And she's going to be presented by the chieftain of the Norwegian boat. Let's get it, brother. Very well done indeed. Come on, big hand. First prize of £10. Oh, dear, dear, dear.
After choosing the Viking Princess, the crew danced in Portree's Hall to the strains of the old Scottish air, Over the Sea to Sky. While they danced, the boat that had been towed under the sea to sky had been left clear of the water as the tide fell and was being pumped out by the local fire brigade. The firemen pumped thousands of gallons out of the longship before she was afloat. For the crew, it was just the beginning of a two-day operation of washing clothes, stripping the engine, and checking the whole structure of the ship. But what effect did the capsize have on the crew?
A very good effect, actually. It sort of knitted them closer together. I think it's, in some ways, been a blessing in disguise. It's really welded them together closer than we've been before, I know that. It's a bit emotional, you know, it's a sort of difficult to describe. It's almost like being a brotherhood now.
2 blocks.
The crew's lockers had been retrieved by fishermen, some from the shores of Rassie, but they'd lost several £1,000s of camera gear and other equipment. When they got back to sea, spirits certainly revived.
We've got to have a pub wherever we go. And it's just not the same sitting out on an open deck. It's nothing. You must always have your English pub. So we just put the piece of canvas up and give the whistle. The swamp is open. They come from far and wide, from all corners of the ship. Yeah, it's all 50 feet of it. And that's our pub, and it works very well indeed. The charges aren't so stiff. We just chip in. But the atmosphere is really great. And it's funny, no matter how far from home, we just sit in our little old, well, we'll call it our Manx pub. And the Norwegians love it. They're our best customers.
Can you just lock it off that piano, please? The Norwegian palate is more geared to fish than what the Manx palate is. And we did have a lot of fish at times. The dried reindeer meat, which we had, I certainly didn't like. His soups, which we have nicknamed Harpic soup, have been quite reasonable until he decided on the last occasion when he made soup to put some fish balls in with it, which were absolutely revolting.
Never tasted anything like it in my life.
Oh, absolutely unbelievable. We've had some incredible steaks which we've cooked on board.
That people have given us in various ports. Generally, I think the feeding and the food generally is better when we leave port, because more often than not a happy butcher will donate some steak to us, or some grocers will give us some groceries. You know, we'll have a fantastic feast about 2 hours after we leave a port.
Really, I've put so much thought. I've changed my whole outlook on life through this voyage. It's made me far more placid. I was certainly, what shall we say, not an angry young man, an angry middle-aged man, aggressive in business and commerce, fighting and striving to do something. And I've suddenly realised that there's 2 sides to life. It's this side that I've discovered that I totally enjoy. The only problem is now how to combine that and have a good living at the same time.
Perhaps chastened and disciplined by the capsize, the longship was noticeably tidier. The crew had the regulated and efficient air of an admiral's barge as they approached their next port of call, Tobermory on the Isle of Mull. Mull is an island full of history. It's in this bay beside Tobermory that a Spanish galleon is said to have sunk many years ago. Indeed, divers have found gold coins and other relics there.
It might tend to make you feel a bit more nomadic, maybe. Possibly we want to try and do something again, you know, a trip sort of similar, some kind of expedition. whether you might find it a bit hard to settle down into a normal job again after this, I don't know. It just remains to be seen.
Yeah, I agree with David. I think we'll find a bit of difficulty just getting back into the routine of going to work and going home and doing your job. You'll always be looking around, seeing, well, what can I do next? And I have great ambitions to go on and do other trips. And it just kind of sets you up in the mood to get on with it.
Lunch.
Vikings certainly didn't drink champagne. They may have eaten lobster and salmon, but it sure wasn't served like this. However, you can overdo realism. And who's going to turn up their nose at a treat like this, especially when it's laid on by a friendly Isle of Man millionaire? It was a diversion, and the crew and local council officials enjoyed the generous gesture to the full.
And then we take a round into the inner harbour, where we'll meet our wives and families and the rest, up into the Viking longhouse.
In Peel?
In Peel.
In Peel.
That's right.
On the 4th?
On the 4th, the evening of the 4th. The only problem is that they've asked us to be absolutely precise in our timing.
Oh,
at 5:45. Not 10 to 6, but 5:45.
That's your champagne, huh?
Cheers, Alec. Very kind of you. Now, we got so used to this, now we're back home, right? Yeah. In the islands. It's the only way we know how to live, every day. So your work's really cut out now. Good.
No more soup, Bud.
Yep, no more half-picked soup, no more dried fish. This is the way we expect to live every day on board. You got that, Red?
Yeah. If you get me a good stove and a good facilities to make it, I will do it. No problem.
Klok, 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 sa høna på haugen. Bålen sprang og regnet med øgon. Nå det ikke komma heim att ombord.
Den var pen. Ah, flott. Skål, gutter. So, Robin, on behalf of Argyll and Bute District Council, I have very much pleasure in giving you this plaque.
Well, bless you. Thank you very much indeed. That's something that we shall treasure and put alongside the other gifts that people have kindly given us throughout the voyage.
Angus, have you anything to say at all?
It's an inspiring kind of romantic idea, this look back into the past, about the pillaging and the marauding and all the things, the alleged things they're supposed to have done. But, you know, I think there must have been some little basis of truth in this business, because there was an old fellow hanging over the rail the other day at Tobermory. Well, this old fellow was gazing somewhat gloomily into the waters, and to cheer him up, I said, "Did you know that the Norsemen are coming this weekend?" And you know, a horrible, waxen, yellowish, sulphurous look appeared on his face, and his eyes were dilated in terrible terror. And he says, "Good God, not again." And I said,
Before the Longship project came along, the crew had a variety of jobs. The chieftain, Robin Bigland, is a man who runs his own insurance company. Others are a blacksmith, a harbour master, a man who sold shaving brushes, a teacher and an apprentice fitter. The liberation from everyday responsibilities would make it difficult for many of us to resist the chance of being a Viking for a couple of months. The whole thing's an adventure and a long-running party. At times, there was the feeling that this was how life was really meant to be lived. It was almost like living in Technicolor. With genuine regret, the crew left Mull, still sailing south. But now there was the anticipation that they were nearing home. They were also sailing into busier waters, waters frequented by larger vessels, all of them interested in the unique longship.
Odin's Raven, Caledonia, Caledonia, do you read over? Highland Seabird, Caledonia, do you read over?
Caledonia, Seabird, loud and clear.
Hello, Highland Seabird, Caledonia, yes, getting you loud and clear. Could you give me a latest position of the Odin's Raven, please? We can't seem to reach her direct over.
Caledonia, Seabird, he's about a mile and a half south of Eeling Glass up there at Salin. He's now under sail and he's making about 5.5 knots now, and the wind's freshening a little bit, so you'll probably pick up. I'd estimate his ETA was more.
The lifeboat from Oban sailed out to escort them through the Firth of Lorne. The longship was such an attraction that the lifeboat men were soon on board, taking it in turns to steer the Viking craft. They were like children with a new toy. As they approached Oban, the lifeboat crew returned to their vessel and the Vikings returned to the longship. It was, for the longship crew, another indication of the tremendous interest in their project. For the men from Oban, most of whom had sailed dozens of different craft, it was the experience of a lifetime.
Yeah, the life will never be the same for anyone. I don't believe so. Even the youngest ones, I think they've grown a couple of years older in these few weeks. Because, you know, there is a sudden mentality in such a voyage where you are so close together that grows into everybody. And I think you learn to feel a bit responsibility to your next man, always.
Why mentally will you never be the same? I mean, in what way have you changed, do you think?
In my case, I know that I'm going to slow down on the work. I'm going to enjoy myself a bit more, take more time off, and trying to relax a bit more than I have done before. You know, you really got time to think out when you're out in open sea like this.
Must have been really a great fun holiday for you.
Oh yeah, it has been, really. And you know, another thing, you know, I think the sailing at sea is not so dangerous. It's the ports that has been dangerous to us on this trip. Because of the hospitality and the way people, you know, are pleased to have us there, and they show off by buying free drinks, for instance, and all the visits to the distilleries have to try their stuff. Out of hospitality, of course, and we have to show off that we like the stuff, you know, and have to take it.
Have you ever crammed so much drinking into such a short space of time in your life before?
No. I think, to be honest, I think I've been drinking more the last 5 weeks than I've done the last 10 years. And I'm surprised, because when I left Norway, I had a bad stomach. Every morning I had to take some acid neutralizing medias. No, my stomach is perfectly well. No problems at all. So it's medicine. Seems like the whiskey's medicine.
By now, they'd completed more than 4/5 of their journey. They'd called in at ports used by Viking ships over 1,000 years ago and visited communities where Viking influence can still be seen in the culture and in family names. However, uppermost in everyone's mind now was the thought of getting home to their wives and families. But they had 2 ports of call before sailing into Peel in the Isle of Man, and they still had what must be a unique encounter to come. Majesty's submarine Odin knew the longship was coming and had sailed from her base in the Clyde to meet Odin's Raven, complete with her own Viking. It was a meeting of the old and the new, spanning more than 1,000 years of maritime history.
Where's my friend the captain? There you go. Welcome, fall into it. Hey, we'd like to take it back with you and I'll you to come on board. You're very welcome. Somebody grab it on the other arm. Give your hand.
Considering the hundreds of thousands of vessels that have sailed the seas, it's hard to imagine a more unlikely encounter. Her Majesty's submariners invited the Vikings on board for a drink, something they needed like a second capsize, but it was a party at sea that's unlikely to be forgotten by either crew.
Hey, let go, forward! Up with it! Thanks, Ian. Be seeing you. Take care. Bye. Bye, guys. See you guys. See you guys. See you guys. Thanks a lot.
Get out.
Six weeks after leaving Trondheim, Odin's Raven was scheduled to arrive at Peel at 5:45. This is where the Vikings first landed. They were to impose their experience on the running of. The Manx Parliament has been in existence for 1,000 years, the first 600 under Viking influence. It was a historic and emotional day for everyone. The men's relatives were expected to stand back when they landed because after an official ceremony, the longship was to sail to the inner harbour where the men would finally disembark. And sharp at 5:45, they approached the shore to be greeted by thousands of excited men, women and children. As they came ashore, such was the enthusiasm of the crowd that they quickly engulfed the crew and many thousands soon lost sight of the Vikings. After a brief ceremony of thanks for their safe return, the men rowed round to the inner harbour to meet their families. And there could be no greater welcome for any sailor home from the sea.
I left a baby behind. And in my absence, it became 1 year old. And in my absence, from rolling over on the floor, it now totters around my house. This is what I've missed.
I see you, silly. Hi, Hookie. How are you?
Small price to pay, very small price. I'm glad I did it because when that boy gets a little older, he and I will be able to relive some of this together.